Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. Hi, I'm Rabbi Steve Wernick, and this is Conversations Over Coffee. I have my coffee. Our guest today is Adam Minsky, the CEO and president of UJA Federation of Toronto, the Greater Toronto Area. Do you have coffee today, Adam? Are you even a coffee drinker?
I only have water.
All right. Well, we'll drink a l'chaim to the water and to the coffee. Adam, thank you so much for this. This Conversations Over Coffee is just designed really for certainly Bethesda community, and what we found is people even beyond Bethesda have been tuning in. 30 minutes once a week to talk with interesting people and to check in and see what's happening in our community in various different corners as it relates to COVID-19 and to our response. You, as the president and CEO of Federation, of course, have a critical role to play in the Jewish community's well-being as we deal with this. But even before we get to that stuff, first of all, how are you doing? How's your family? How are you guys managing during this this time of this historic moment, really, of crisis?
So thank you for asking. I mean, you really come to appreciate what matters in these kinds of situations. And my family, my immediate family, my parents, my in-laws, everyone, thank God, are doing well. I have 3 teenage kids at home. All 3 are really hoping to hear that they're going to be going to Jewish overnight camp this summer. Camp Kadima in the Maritimes is a place that makes them incredibly happy. And in my role, I too am hoping that they get to do that, although I think, like many things in the community, it may not happen. And my oldest is in grade 12 at Tannenbaum Chat. Unfortunately, it looks like graduation and class trips and all of the kind of stuff that teenagers look forward to as the culmination of those kind of experiences aren't going to happen. And same with the younger 2 who had been promised that they were going to get their braces off, and that isn't happening anytime soon. So in the big picture, those are really trivial things. The important stuff is what matters, and everyone's fine. And thank you for asking. I personally feel very privileged to be in a position where I can do something to help the community through the effects of this pandemic, and feel fortunate to be in that kind of position to help. I think if I was at home and not able to do something, I would be even more frustrated than I think it is when you have the opportunity to do something.
I think that's really telling. One of the things that we learned from psychologists about how to cope in these moments is to really focus on appreciation and gratitude. And also, if there is something that one can do to help another person, even if it's just picking up the phone and saying hello, those small acts of kindness go a long way, not only, of course, in helping the person on the receiving end, but also in terms of our own sense of being able to do something. Like the worst feeling is being totally helpless. I know that
we've seen it. I mean, one of the things as a federation that we've been doing, and I know Beth Tzedek has been doing a similar initiative, is we've mobilized a couple thousand volunteers who have been calling every community member that's on our database to just check in. So far, we've spoken to over 16,000 community members. One of my favorite moments in the past 6 weeks was a voicemail message I received from a UJA donor who wanted to make me aware that someone was crank calling on behalf of UJA because he got a call from UJA just to check in, and we didn't ask for anything in return. And he was sure that the president and CEO needed to know that someone was was behaving uncharacteristically for UJA. So it was a moment of levity in a time that hasn't had a lot of that.
It's the same for us when our volunteers call. It's like, hello, my name is Steve. I'm calling from Bethzetic, and I'm not asking for money. It's like you have to almost preface that. I know from having communicated with you exactly that, and we've been doing the same, that the initial response is first and foremost to call people and check in and make sure that the most vulnerable in our community are having the essential needs that are met. I know that you're continuing to do that. Now that we've been isolated for 6 weeks, and we still don't know exactly when we're going to be able to leave our homes and what the gradual response to an emerging new normal is going to be. Has there been a shift in the priorities of Federation at this time? Tell us
Yeah.
what Federation is doing currently as a response to this crisis, and what's in the planning stages for the future.
Sure. So, look, our community is facing a crisis on a scale that just a few months ago we couldn't have imagined. And I believe we face two grave risks, that our community's agencies and resources will be overwhelmed by the needs of the Jewish vulnerable, and that we will see the most massive loss of participation in Jewish life in the history of our community as members withdraw from our day schools, supplementary schools, camps, JCCs, and synagogues. And left unaddressed, these two challenges run the risk of dismantling many of our community's core institutions. And for a community that's known for its high participation rates in Jewish life, this defining characteristic would be lost. And I'll tell you, we spent the initial part of this crisis making emergency grants to our social service agencies because they're very much on the front lines right now of what we are facing. And they are seeing things that, frankly, demonstrate that a much more serious crisis is about to emerge. Jewish Family and Child Service is seeing a steep increase in people calling just for assistance with basic needs. The number of domestic abuse calls has spiked. JAX is seeing an 85% increase in the number of people who are calling for help with substance abuse. Bernard Battelle sees a 40% increase in the number of kosher Meals on Wheels requests. The numbers are really foreshadowing something much more serious that's to come. And, on the one hand, what we're going to see as a community, look, if you look at the general statistics in Canadian society, 4 in 10, or 44% of Canadian households are facing job loss or a significant reduction in their working hours. The job loss numbers are 9 times higher than they were at the height of the 2008-2009 financial crisis. And as a Jewish community, we're not immune to that. We're facing the same things. Nearly half of all Jewish households are suffering. And so on the one hand, you have the 1 in 8 Jews who struggled with poverty before the pandemic, who are now in even greater need. And with that group, I believe UJA, together with its social service agencies, and because of our annual campaign, we will be able, provided that our annual campaign stays strong, we'll be able to meet the needs of the already vulnerable. What we cannot manage are the surging needs of the newly vulnerable. And in a community as amazing as ours, we should never have to turn away vulnerable Jews due to insufficient resources. If 4 in 10 households are impacted, many people will not be reemployed when all this is over. They're going to need our help through our social service agencies to make sure that we're there to meet their needs so that they can reemploy within a year. We're anticipating, together with our social service agencies, a doubling of the caseload in the community. So right now in the Jewish community, there are 25,000 vulnerable Jews who receive care from our Jewish social service agencies. we're expecting that in the next year to grow to 50,000. And where we're focused is we launched last night an emergency campaign because part of what we want to do in that emergency campaign is raise an additional $7 million to double the amount we invest in our Jewish social service agencies so that on a one-time basis, they can meet this surge in newly vulnerable Jews. And I'll give you a practical reason why it's so important that we be able to do so. If we're able to help people when at the early stage of this crisis, so that many of these people are highly employable, they have terrific skills, they're just going to need retraining and supports in order to get back on their feet. If we're able to do that, it will create a much healthier dynamic for our community. If we're not able to help our social service agencies meet that unprecedented need, what's going to happen is, the average cost to our community of helping someone through our social service agencies, take a typical family, would be about $10,000 a year. That's a combination of the direct financial supports that we provide those families over and above what government gives them, plus assistance for housing. If we have to sustain a family on those kind of supports for multiple years, the cost to the community of doing that will be much greater than if we're able to rise to the occasion right now to help our Jewish social service agencies meet that kind of unprecedented demand. And the challenges are similar in other aspects of the community. So take in the Jewish education field with the day schools. Right now, we support 2,300 low-income families to access the Jewish day school system through tuition assistance. If 4 in 10 households face serious economic effects from the pandemic, we'll see a spike of somewhere between 40 to 50% in the number of families who need our assistance on a one-time basis to give their kids a Jewish education while they financially recover. Based on what our schools are seeing right now, we are expecting the need for scholarships and interest-free loans to be about for an additional 1,000 students in the coming year. That's a one-time investment of $9 million over and above what we already put in. And, as a parent, I think about how hard this has been for my own kids. I can't imagine how terrible it would be for a child to have to withdraw from Jewish day school because their parents are temporarily struggling and there just aren't enough funds in the system to give them the one-time assistance that they need. And as we all know, when you leave the Jewish day school system, it isn't easy to come back a year or two later. And again, if we're able to meet that special need of about additional $9 million a year, the scenario is really quite okay for the schools, because what would happen in that case is, let's say I was speaking to a couple. He's a dentist, she's a chiropractor. I was speaking to them a week ago. They have 3 kids in Jewish day school, all in the elementary level. One was in grade 1, one was in grade 3, another one in grade 5. They haven't been working for the last 2 months. They're paying rent for their offices, keeping their practices going while they're bringing in no income. They said to me very clearly, without help, they're not going to be able to keep their 3 kids in Jewish education. They believe within a year's time, they will be back on their feet and they'll be able to pay the full fee of tuition. If we're able to intervene with them, let's say, and provide half the typical tuition at a Jewish day school, which is about tuition is $16,000. So for 3 kids, half for each kid, that would be about $24,000 on a one-time basis. If we were able to get them that support so that they could keep their kids together and not have to deal with the difficult situation of pulling their kids out and separating them from their friends and starting a new school, those kids would remain in the system. And as the parents continue to pay tuition for every subsequent year, with kids in grade 1, grade 3, and grade 5, those parents would be paying $240,000 in tuition over the remaining years of their kids' education in a kindergarten through grade 8 school. That return on investment to the community of helping someone on a one-time basis with an exceptional need will pay itself back 900-fold to a school that sees itself being able to do that. The alternative is if we can't be there to help, what happens in a typical school is as enrollment declines, tuition has to go up, class sizes have to increase, supports are withdrawn from the class. As that starts to happen, other families start to withdraw their kids because the product is weakening. And then you start to get this downward spiral, which ends up in the really difficult situation of school closures. So, as you talk about what am I thinking about going forward, it is all these kinds of situations. The example I gave you with schools is the same thing with camp, supplementary school, JCCs. If we're able to be there for our community on a one-time basis to help people who are going to have real economic hardship in the coming year get back on their feet, we can emerge much stronger out of this as a community. If we're not able to do that, I really worry that we are going to see the dismantling of a lot of core institutions as people withdraw.
So just those two examples that you gave are $16 million of emergency funding.
Yeah.
What's the total number that Federation's looking at in order to adequately support families during this time?
Sure. Right. And please appreciate that what I'm going to give you is our best assessment with our agencies, social service agencies, schools, camps, JCCs right now. It is a very fluid situation, and we adjust it, and it's part of what we believe is our added value to the community. We adjust it as new things happen. What are some of those new things? One is government assistance. We're helping through our partners at the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, otherwise known as CJA, to help Jewish organizations access as much government support as we can. We want to make sure that they've exhausted all resources from all three levels of government before we step in with tzedakah from the community. And so in some cases, some organizations will get additional funding and the need for the community to step in will be reduced. Another example of something that's still up in the air, as I mentioned earlier, my kids are hoping that they're going to be able to go to Camp Kadima in the Maritimes this summer, but camp may not happen. If camp doesn't happen, the Jewish summer camps are going to have a real challenge on their hands because they've all collected fees for the summer. For every camp, somewhere between 35 and 50% of the costs are fixed costs of just keeping the property up and having a basic staff who will operate. If they have to refund all that money that has already been spent on keeping the camp going, many of these camps aren't going to be able to survive without support from the community. We want to make sure we're there to help the Jewish camping sector emerge strong, but that's one of the other important things that's a variable. Right now, our estimate is that on top of the $60 million annual campaign that we run, we are going to need an additional $25 million. In other words, $85 million of need in total. And that's why we launched an emergency campaign, where we've asked people to recommit their annual campaign gift, but then over and above that, help us reach that additional $25 million that we need on a one-time basis, and truly a one-time basis, to make sure that our community emerges resilient from this.
So that's a big number. Clearly, Federation is relying on those that may be less wealthy today than they were in February, but still blessed with successful businesses and portfolios to step up and to lead in that emergency campaign. What are you optimistic that you're going to be able to achieve that in these circumstances?
I am. I am, because I think the defining characteristic of this Jewish community is the high quality of its leadership. And I know that this is the worst possible time for me to be going to any of our generous philanthropists in this community and asking for a gift. Trust me, I'd rather be asking it any other time than now. But truly, we've never faced a crisis like this one. We are well rehearsed at how to respond when the crisis is in Israel or elsewhere in the Jewish world. And what we haven't experienced before is this kind of crisis in the community. To be truthful with you, we have faced it once before. We have a wonderful department at UJA Federation called the Ontario Jewish Archives. And they pulled for me in 1920. They did a wonderful piece. I don't know if you see, but I send out every Wednesday something called the Desk of Adam Minsky. It was in the last Desk of Adam Minsky. They pulled this piece from 1920 of how the Jewish community responded to the pandemic, which was the Spanish flu pandemic. And it literally has a listing of all the names of the donors in 1920 and how much money they gave to help the Jewish community recover. That was the last time we faced any kind of crisis like this here. And so although it's really a time when people are struggling, we hope, and as an optimist, I believe that people will step forward and really help us rise to the occasion, because the long-term impact, if we don't, will be much more severe for our community.
So obviously, as a congregational rabbi and as rabbi of one of the leading synagogues in Canada and certainly in the GTA, Bet Tzedek, we're thinking the same questions about how do we maintain our value added, how do we pivot for value added that goes online, how do we think about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, in which the possibility of not being in our buildings is becoming increasingly likely. And even if we were to be allowed into our buildings with some sort of social distancing, that would greatly limit our accessibility to running the high holidays. Has Federation been doing any thinking about the role that the synagogue communities make as a essential institution to Jewish life in the city, and share with us what that thinking has been?
So yeah, I think that out of a crisis, there's also opportunity, and I really believe that what we're trying to do with an emergency campaign for community resilience isn't to restore the community to its pre-COVID-19 exact form. This is an opportunity as a community to make our community stronger as we come out of this. And the synagogue community is a critical part of that conversation. I think it's a little bit early to project what the financial needs of the synagogue community are going to be, other than to say, if 4 in 10 Jewish families are financially affected by the pandemic, that is also going to translate into a challenge for the synagogue community, and the synagogue community, together with UJA Federation, need to address that, because, as you said so correctly, our focus right now is on the essentials of Jewish life, and the synagogues are definitely part of those essentials of Jewish life. So we're going to have to figure that out. It's a time to experiment, in my view, with new dues models that, in regular times may have taken years to get consensus on how to do it, but because we're in such exceptional times, maybe now's the opportunity to do it. And I'll declare my conflict as a member of Bet Tzedek. Whatever you want to do with the dues does directly affect me, but I welcome that kind of change. I also believe that we have to look at new ways of connecting with each other. Last night we launched our emergency campaign with our top gift donors over Zoom. I was really, really nervous about doing so, because we've never done anything like that as UJA. We have a well-rehearsed way of bringing our donors together to derive strength from being in the same room and getting together around a special campaign like this. And I was really moved at how emotional and meaningful and how connected we all felt to each other, although it was all just a bunch of little boxes on a screen peering at everybody in their living rooms or dens. And to me, it spoke to the opportunity through technology that synagogues can really look at as we get closer. There's all kinds of things, but certainly, at the forefront of my thinking in the immediate term is the critical role that the synagogue communities can play in helping the vulnerable in our community. The synagogues are not just houses of worship. They are really, and particularly, the focus that you've brought around being a compassionate organization that cares for the whole individual. There is such opportunity to reach out as a synagogue community to help people. You just don't know who's affected by this, and it's so important that we be there together. The need is on an unprecedented level for our community, and it's certainly not just for the Jewish social service agencies to be there responding. The synagogue community has a very, very important role to play.
We have a question that came in from Facebook. Somebody would like to know a little bit more about DOAM and how one might be able to sign up for that.
The easiest way is you can just send me an email, and I will gladly answer and connect you to make sure you're online. My email address is aminsky, AMINSKY, at UJAFed, or FED.org. aminsky at UJAFed.org. Send me an email, and I gladly will connect you to anything you need.
Have you, getting back to the synagogue dues model, your conflict of interest aside, do you have any good ideas?
Look, I'm only 3 years into being CEO of UJA Federation, but I know enough not to step into territory that I'm not.
Oh, no, come on, Adam, I needed some help here.
I will truly be looking to you and to others. I do read online of all kinds of innovative experiments that are going on around North America. And I don't know which ones are truly most effective or most appropriate for Beth Tzedec. But if there was ever a time to experiment, now is it.
Right. So just to respond to that, I mean, obviously this year, our position is one of empathy and of welcoming and embrace, and an understanding, as you said, that 4 out of 10 households are going to be impacted minimally from this, and that membership ability to pay is not a barrier to belonging. That's the first statement. And then also, like, as you said, it's like in order to provide the caring community the spiritual well-being that we have been providing through services, through counseling, through also ensuring people have food through food vouchers and partnering with Federation, it cost us about $2,700 a household to run. And so part of what we're going to have to do is encourage those that are less impacted by the crisis to help us sustain our ability to help those that are more impacted by the crisis. So it's similar. It's like, we're expecting a significant decline in revenue. Fortunately, we have great leadership, lay and professional. We have a great community, and we're working on our plans as well, to ensure that we can do the sacred work that we're called upon to do.
You know, another area that is ripe for experimentation in this kind of environment is in the area of supplementary Jewish education. And, you know, I know Besedek has an excellent supplementary school, and we are just seeing all kinds of opportunities online that weren't otherwise possible. You know, just the opportunity to learn from people who are geographically distant, but when you're doing it over Zoom, all of that falls away. I was part of a bar mitzvah 2 weeks ago that was originally supposed to be in Israel, and you know, while it lacked the physical intimacy, there were people from all around the world celebrating this young man's bar mitzvah, who I know never would have been able to be part of it otherwise. And, you know, when you extend that to Jewish learning, there are great thought leaders that could be accessed. Just, you know, on last night's Zoom call, we had Rabbi Sachs and Barry Weiss speak to our leadership. Both would have been enormously challenging to secure in person for an event at any time. But to get them for 15 minutes to join a call, to be able to speak to everybody, is highly doable. And when you extend that into the education sphere, it just opens all kinds of opportunities that I'm sure with leadership like yours, the synagogue can take advantage of and chart new territory in Jewish education.
For sure. And in fact, I've been very impressed with the way in which our leadership at Besedek has made that transition to an online school setting. Our attendance has been greater than 75%, which tells you a lot too. And I think that there's a great opportunity there. But it's also, you know, we had last week, we had Professor Stephen Burke, who's no stranger to the GTA. We did the annual Kerzner lecture, and we invited 4 or 5 other synagogues to collaborate in it. We had nearly 1,000 people participate, including some of Professor Burke's groupies that come from other places. So there are people from Cleveland on the line, from British Columbia. It was like, it was amazing what this opens up. Just one last clarifying question, and then we'll call it a day. Somebody wants to know what DOAM is.
DOAM is like insider speak for the desk of Adam Minsky, which is the weekly e-newsletter that I send out on Wednesdays. So that's what it refers
the desk of Adam Minsky.
Yes, I have a very prolific desk.
All right. Adam, thank you so much for this time. And let me thank you as a member of this community for the work that UJA Federation does. This is an extraordinary moment in history. We've never been in a circumstance where entire economies have been frozen. One thing that gives me resiliency and hope is that I know that we're part of a great people with a very long history. And we've seen the greatest lows that humanity has caused upon itself, as well as, you know, that just living in the world has caused as part of our experience. But we've also seen the greatest highs. And I think that we can be hopeful that we're part of a people that know how to figure out really complex, large historical problems. And we've been blessed in North America and in Israel with freedom and opportunity and access that we can not only ensure that our community survives and thrives, but we also have a major role to play in the societies in which we live to make sure that our city, our province, our country, Israel, and Jews around the world can survive and thrive. And I just want to thank you for your leadership for that. And I look forward to continuing to be your partner and your friend as we address these complex issues in our time, but come out on the other side with the opportunities for thriving as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the conversation, as I always do with you. Being part of the congregation is really important, particularly at moments like this, to feel the sense of community. And thank you and your whole team for the incredible work that you're doing.
Great. Thank you, Adam.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Next week's Conversations Over Coffee, I believe, is with Neshama Karlibach. So that'll be fun, not only to catch up with her with regard to what she's doing and the new album and music that she's writing. So it'll be a wonderful opportunity to catch up with someone who spent a lot of time in Toronto, of course, and is an internationally known Jewish singer and songwriter. So we hope you'll join us for that next week, 12:30, from Beth Tzedek Congregation's Facebook page, as well as from our YouTube channel. And then the week after, we have Jeremy Fingerman, who is the CEO and president of the Foundation for Jewish Camp. And maybe by that time, Camp will have a little clearer picture as to what its needs and plans are going to be. Certainly, I know my household as well, both a daughter who is looking forward to going back as a counselor, and a wife who's been working every summer as a nurse at camp for the last 16 years. Camp is very important to us as well, and we're hopeful that we're hopeful that camp will be in business, but we know that first and foremost, the Jewish value, pikuach nefesh, of preserving life, must take precedence. And if that's the case, we'll all have to be there together to figure out not only how we support camp during this crisis, but how, as we talked about today, how we support the larger community as well. So thank you, everyone, for joining in. Have a very pleasant week. And don't forget, every day, practice an attitude of gratitude. It really helps to cope and to find resiliency. Thank you, everyone.